And welcome everybody to the ARC Transportation monthly update. It's July. July's a good month typically. It's been not too hot. We were just talking about this. It hasn't been crazy hot. It's actually, we've had some really nice days here in Northeast Ohio, and that's always enjoyed.
It feels like summer has moved back a month this year. Like June was pretty chilly and rainy, but now it's getting beautiful again.
Yeah. So speaking of that, our segue, we have the Summer Olympic Games kicking off this week. So are you an Olympics guy? Are you going to pay attention?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
What sports?
I've always found like the obviously your track and field is always fun, right?
Yeah.
Like your track and field. I never have got into like any of the like basketball or anything like that in the Olympics. But with Simone Biles, like if you got to be a Simone Biles fan.
Yeah.
Like the gymnastics for like Simone Biles, she's incredible.
She's incredible.
We'll watch it. A couple Olympics ago was like the first time I actually like got into the Olympics. So we ended up like it just kind of was like always playing on the background because is it CNBC or somebody has
a channel that's always
just
playing
like dedicated to it. So it was always out in the background, and I watched a ton, but I don't think I've watched it. I don't know. We'll see. I'm interested. How about you?
Yeah. I like it too. I mean, I'm like hit or miss if I catch that it's happening, but I always like the combat sports they have in the summer. So you have like your judo, boxing, karate, taekwondo, all that stuff. I like archery. I'm like, I can kind of get into any of them if they're in front of me because I just think it's fascinating. These people really doing things at a high level. So that, we'll see how much I can watch. But
with Phelps not swimming anymore, it's kind of like, But when Phelps was swimming, it was like, let's watch this.
It's a big pool. Yeah, he did have a big pool. So, and it's funny, they're still calling it obviously 2020 games because it was supposed to be last year.
I didn't realize that. I guess it would be
for COVID. So still the 2020 games, summer games, just technically happening in 2021.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep. All right, Andrew, let's roll into some industry news. I want to talk about something that's happened in the air freight world. There's a new TSA air cargo screening program basically went into effect starting this month in July of 2021. And really, I think it's going to impact air exports, but they're going to have to screen all cargo that goes on cargo planes, which in the past, that wasn't always true, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's two different screening mandates. There's a screening mandate for passenger planes and a screening mandate for cargo planes. So back when in 9/11, when TSA kind of came out and said, hey, we got to make sure we know what we're putting on planes, they rolled these dates out into the future of saying, hey, everything should be screened by this date on passenger planes, which happened many years ago. But then on the all cargo planes, they said we need to have all screening happening on these all cargo planes. Now, it's important to note that domestically in the U.S., we don't move much on all cargo planes. Outside of your integrated carriers like UPS and FedEx, very few planes are wide body planes, the large all cargo planes moving intra-US. A lot of times it's for exports. So this mandate is way more focused and targeted at the exports, manufacturers who export. So they're giving them two options basically. The first set of rules is for IACs, so IACs, companies like ARC who operate on behalf of the airlines. So we have a standing with the TSA and with airlines where we're allowed putting cargo on planes one way or another, whether it's passenger planes or cargo planes. So for companies like us who are also certified screening partners, it requires now for the certified screening partners to have 100% compliance for screening even on cargo planes. So prior to that, you didn't need a shipper could be unknown. Now the shipper must be known. And the screening has to happen for you to be able to put that on a cargo plane. So it creates one more step in the process where you didn't have to have a known shipper, and by known that means at the TSA standards. So they have to be approved as a shipper by the TSA. Once that happens, they become a known shipper, and you can, move the goods around. So that's really what ends up happening with this ruling.
That makes sense because it was added to line with the international regulation that just passed. So like you're saying, if it's primarily exports, cargo planes, it makes sense why the TSA would draft that up now. So
we're trying to do those. That we're part of the ICAO, whatever that is, whatever that moniker stands for. But we're being part of that. This was kind of our side of saying, okay, now we'll make sure we have all these exports because we expect imports to come in. We expect a certain level of screening on imports to come in.
Yeah.
So very similar.
Yeah. So what impact will this have on shippers who are for exporting? Are they going to see much difference?
Yeah, I'd be hesitant to say you're going to see a ton of difference.
Yeah.
But there will be, I do believe there's going to be congestion, right? Because every time a new rule comes around, there's people who don't know how to implement the rule, both from the actual like shipper standpoint. So the IACs I talked about, what does this mean to them? What type of documentation and paperwork do they need to maintain compliance? But also on enforcing the rules. A lot of times you see when a new rule comes out, this is not just TSA, but anybody who's in charge of enforcing a rule, they're having to figure out, okay, what does it really mean to be compliant with this regulation? What does it not mean? So I do foresee, at least in the near term, the next, let's say 6 months, you're going to see some slowdowns in certain areas, predominantly because you're going through gateways, cities. So you're going to go through New York and Chicago and LA and Houston, the big gateways, which is where you're going to see these slowdowns happen because they're all grappling with what does this change mean? And more so, the people forwarding their freight to them, are they a known shipper? Are they not a known shipper? What does this mean? You're going to have a lot of short-term impact, but I don't like the long tail of this. I don't think you're going to see major business interruptions.
Gotcha. Okay. Mm-hmm. I do want to mention, too, that TSA has put out something called a Certified Cargo Screening Facility for shippers and manufacturers, where you can actually go through their process to become certified at your location. If anybody's interested in learning more about that, reach out to us and we can kind of help you walk through that process, what that looks like. All right, moving on to ocean. Really, there's still major congestion in the U.S. It's funny because it's starting to hit like major news sources. I was driving in today and they were talking about shortages for farmers for different materials and oil and gas. And they're finally talking about shortage of drivers and all this really a lot of it's starting at the ports coming in too, and congestion. They're having the same problems as the logistics across the country. Yeah. But yeah, we really haven't seen too much change. People are trying to avoid crowded ports.
They're trying to find capacity to come into the U.S. Yeah. It's not even about crowded ports. It's just capacity. Yeah. And the rail is, I don't even know how, they're probably 30 to 60 days behind minimum behind. Yeah. So it's not good. There's no good way to describe the market. I will say people are getting more creative. So predominantly you have large vessel operators that move these containers, and they might be a few thousand TEUs or containers. 20-foot containers is what a TEU stands for. They're moving them across the ocean. People are now chartering their own vessels. Much smaller vessels, 200, 300, 400 container vessels. They'll charter them, and they'll try to build their own consolidation. So I might need 200 containers, and I'll try to find other guys who can fill up the rest of them, simply because years past, that never made sense. Monetarily, it never made sense. Right. It'd be very expensive. When you're paying $3,000 for a container, it never made sense. Now that you're paying $14,000 for a container, it's about break even, but you get capacity. So we're starting to see some very unique ways to solve these problems for large volume shippers. But just like anything, one person finds it, and then everybody rushes to that, and then there's no more charter vessels available. So we're consuming any capacity we have at such an alarming rate that you have it down here. The growth is pretty much astronomical in an industry that requires so much investment into infrastructure. Right. That's kind of the big difference, I think, when you look at ocean versus even trucking in the U.S., right? Sure. The infrastructure required for ocean, we're talking ships, cranes, rail, drayage to and from ports. We're talking handling. It's astronomical. In terms of how much equipment is required and just infrastructure is required to be successful and efficient at it. And there's no way you plan for a 30 or a 40 or a 50% growth in a single year. There's just no way you could do it. Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you start thinking about all the components and parts and pieces that have to happen for shipment to move across the ocean. Yeah. So just a couple facts about that. The Port of Houston saw 39% growth of imports from year over year, from June of last year to June this year. You saw similar things in Charleston, South Carolina. The ports are just, people are trying to avoid the really congested ports, but like you said, it just spills into, as soon as someone finds a good lane, it spills into that. Exactly. And it's really taken off. Well, it's funny, you show the difference here. You showed 39% growth in a year in Houston and 10% in Charleston. Going back to my city, even 10% is too much in a single year for a port to explode. No one builds a port thinking we're going to grow 10% year over year, because it'd be almost impossible to plan for or actually afford to build. So everybody everywhere is just struggling. Not to mention just getting the vessels to there. So it is what it is. We just got to keep on moving on, and hopefully we think of new and inventive ways to move stuff.
Yeah, and you brought this up last month, but we are on the second half of the year now, so we're moving into a lot of heavy shipping seasons. So
this is the Super Bowl, right? This is when normally you'd start seeing those imports continue to climb because everyone's prepping for their holiday season. So raw goods are coming in, even finished goods are starting to come into the DCs.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll see
how the next 2 months go.
Well, let's take a quick look at truckload as well. Rates have remained pretty actually steady in truckload, steadily high. They're high,
steady but high.
Yeah, steady but high. And the current national average, I think, for vans right now is about 6 to 1. Six
loads
shippers
to one truck.
Yeah, 6 loads to one truck. So, again, there is a lot of issues facing that industry as well. Mm-hmm. And until some major things change, this is probably what we're looking at, right, throughout the rest of the year at least.
At least the rest of the year. And I don't necessarily know if we're going to have this big fall, like big dip afterwards. Not that I think these are the new norm, but if you're a CFO, if you're a CFO and you're planning, I would definitely take this as the model going forward for how supply chain is going to cost you.
Yeah.
Simply because we've talked about this almost ad nauseum in many different times. Is with a 6-to-1 ratio, that means trucks are in the ability to make the decisions when and where they want to run.
Yep.
And there is no end in sight for that because you have this shrinking driver pool, meaning there's going to be less trucks next year, less trucks the year after that, and it's going to keep shrinking because we're not putting in more drivers that are actually retiring. So that ratio, if that ratio was to hold true for next year at 6-to-1, because of driver shrinkage, you actually might have a 6.5-to-1 ratio next year, which isn't a good thing if you're a shipper, right? That means you're going to cost more. And in general, everybody starts looking at these rates as normal. So we haven't had much of a change in the last probably 2 years where we're seeing rates like stable. They might stabilize, they might dip 5-10%, but they're not going to go back to a normal, they're not going to drop 20-30% unless there's something catastrophic that happens.
Now, do you think this will lead any shippers to either invest in a fleet for themselves or add on to their fleet? I mean, we did a blog a while ago on should I add a fleet of trucks, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. But
that was how long? That was probably that was
2 years ago. Probably 2-3 years ago. Yeah. But when you have times like this with all this uncertainty ahead, and you're always going to need the spot market, right? Because capacity changes for shippers all the time. Mm. But that brings up that question: if that's a solid, plan moving forward for right now, or
it's
an option.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. I mean, it's got to be a plan.
Yeah,
you actually can't execute on that plan right now, which is kind of this. It's kind of a unique time because there's no tractors available to even purchase. Yeah. So even if you wanted to start your own fleet, I mean, I've heard in some cases they've sold tractors up and through 2024. So
it's wild.
I mean, if you're looking to say, okay, I want to start a fleet, where you can even get the equipment to start your fleet from, because you have Amazon and Walmart and all these other organizations trying to buy their own fleets, and that's outside of your typical LTL market, which is growing at an exponential rate right now as well. And then you have shortages, right? You have silicon shortages, so the chips, the same chips that you put in your little car are the same type of chips they put in big trucks. And they're not available. So you have these shortages. So again, supply chain is hitting the people that are affecting supply chain, and it's going to cause delays. So even if you wanted to start your own fleet, it would be very difficult to get the number of units available to really impact, I think, your
make
overall
a big difference.
Spend. Yeah. And then you have the driver shortage as well. So now you're competing with the driver.
You got higher.
Who's got other options. So I think that there will be a lot of shippers who can get creative with this, as well as carriers. The day of the truck driver being, I grew up with a family of truck drivers, first off. So I have uncles, my father was a truck driver. I grew up in the truck driver world. But it was always, I don't want to say looked down upon, but it was a very blue collar job.
Sure.
But we've seen electricians, we've seen plumbers, we've seen surges in those industries just due to the money that you're able to make basically out of high school. And with some regulations they might be changing in terms of age of being able to drive a truck. Right now it's 21 for insurance to really work and a couple other things. They're talking about bringing that down to 18 so they can start infusing drivers in there. If that's the case, there might be a lot of opportunity and availability for adding additional drivers. So I think there might be some winners in terms of understanding, hey, how do we speak to that generation, and how do we maybe change how we drive trucks in general to where someone doesn't have to be on the road for 14 days, without seeing their family or their friends or something like that.
Yeah. No, thanks for I wanted to bring that up because, I think that those are thoughts that are going through shippers' minds right now. What options can we have? And like we said, we've talked about the fleet in the past, building your own fleet. And it seems like a simple solution, but it's actually, there's a lot of layers to that, and especially in the current market. So appreciate that insight.
Sure.
All right, Andrew, for our shipping tip this month, I wanted to talk about something that's used in pricing for shipments all the time, and it's dimensional weight. Because weight's really important in logistics, right? Everything that moves on the road or an airplane or an ocean vessel has weight capacities and restraints. They can only put so much weight on there. And traditionally, it's always been used at the actual weight, right? Physical weight was always used to help calculate costs because it makes sense. The more something weighs, the more energy it takes to move it, right?
Sure.
But then you had lightweight stuff that wasn't very heavy, but it was taking up a lot of space on trucks and chains, which... Here comes dimensional weight. Can you kind of help us understand how it came about and why it's used today for pricing?
Absolutely. So one of the ways I like to explain this to customers or even new employees, when new employees come in, trying to explain them dimensional weight, is the easiest way to do it is most everybody has a TV in their home, right? And those TVs went from being, 90, like the first flat panels that came out, those were like 100 pounds or not. I had an old plasma, right? A 90-some pound plasma.
Yeah.
It was a Black Friday deal. I wasn't like I was, loaded or anything, but a Black Friday deal plasma. Thing weighed like 90 pounds. You need two guys to put it on the wall, right? Now, the same 48-inch TV weighs like 18 pounds or 20 pounds, right? You lift it up. But the size is the same, right? Like the box is the same size.
Right.
But if I was to only charge it, so it's taking up the same amount of size inside that truck, but it weighs a third. So what dimensional weight does is basically says, well, it might weigh a third, but it's taking up the volume of what something at 90 pounds should be.
Yeah.
So we're going to bill you at 90 pounds, not at 30 pounds, simply because that's how much it takes to move that. Because now, like you had said, it takes how much energy it is. Well, now it's about space and volume because we have gotten better and lighter and cheaper and faster and stronger in many ways with how we produce product and things like that. So that's why you see dimensional weight, or in the LTL world, it's considered density or class. And classes have been around for a while, but they've gotten even more strict in terms of how classifications work, when an exemption applies, and things like that. So that's the best way to describe dimensional weight. Now, or I guess why it came about. Okay. Now, in terms of what is it? I kind of touched on it a little bit already. It's how much space something takes up in relation to how much that space could carry in terms of a weight. So it no longer, it still takes the same amount of fuel and everything to move a truck from point A to point B. But if everything weighs less on a truck, it still is going to cost the same for the carrier. Yeah. So they're looking to be compensated for it.
Because they're losing money on stuff that was very lightweight, right? But took up a lot of space. Sure. Because you can't stack on top of it, and they can't fill the truck up to the max capacity that they want to. So they basically found a way to say, look, we're going to charge you for that space, not just the weight that it's used, so that it helps them balance out their loads and also, not lose money on shipments.
That's exactly right. And it's gotten even more. So now dimensionally, you have different dim factors, right? If it's shipping internationally, if it's shipping domestically, if it's shipping on a
just
truck.
To explain that, a dim factor is that's created by the carrier, right? The asset owner.
Yes.
They give you a number to divide your volume by, because they can determine, hey, like an average shipment for us, we feel like is this number. So they give you this dim factor.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
So that dim factor is what you use then to devise, okay, this is how much something actually weighs. Yeah. And, sneaky in terms of it's easy if you're a parcel company. So parcel companies used to be 194. So their dim factor. I'm giving this for a reason. It's getting in the weeds, but I'm giving you a reason for this. So it used to be 194. Now I think it's 139, right? Okay. So the same box 5 years ago was based off of a 194 dim factor. Now it's based off of a 139 dim factor, meaning you've increased your cost or your weight by, some massive percentage. I don't know the exact percentage off my head right now, but you've increased your weight by such a percentage. even though the box didn't change in anything, nothing changed in it. So while the rates haven't gone up for these carriers, they have because density and dimensions have changed. So if you were shipping a block of gold, right?
Yeah.
It's cost you the same for the last 10 years in terms of just general rates. But if you were shipping voluminous items, like think of shoes, right? Shoes take up a big box area. They might only weigh 5 pounds, but you're going to be shipping 15 pounds. Your shipping costs are going to be based off of 15 pounds because of the box of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different. So they've been able to kind of bump up rates to keep up with the cost of not only inflation, but the cost of moving those goods costing more when you look at fuel and you look at space at a premium and all that.
So it gives them another number to tinker with,
another number to mess with, another lever to pull.
And if you're not paying attention, that can sneak up on you, and why is this charging more money?
And it's a good thing to negotiate because you can negotiate them. So if you are a shipper that does have voluminous stuff, negotiate your density, your dim factor, your density class.
Yeah. And I want to know too, they'll use whatever's heavier, right? So if your dim if the dim weight is lower than the actual weight, they'll pick the actual weight. Mm-hmm. But if the dim weight's higher than the actual weight, they're going to pick the dimensional weight to use for
whatever
rating.
works in their favor.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, I appreciate that and helping us understand that because again, it's very common in our industry and it's good for shippers to know how they're getting rated when you look at packages. Mm-hmm. And quick note too on that, we have some shippers that have, odd shaped freight. And if you don't know this, when you put something on a pallet or something's hanging off, I think of like a lawnmower, right? Mm-hmm. The most of it's in the center, the weight, but you have this handle that's sticking out. Mm-hmm. If that's sticking off the pallet, well, with dimensional weight, they're going to basically look at that entire space, right, to fit your shipment.
Yeah.
And so it's a good idea to check your packaging, right? Your crating, your palleting.
If it's hanging off a pallet that's hanging off pallet 4 inches, it's the pallet plus the 4 inches, and they square the whole thing off. They cube the whole thing.
And same
off.
with height. If there's one pole that's sticking up 5 feet, they're going to charge you.
Which is like you see this stuff and you're like, oh gosh, let's try to figure this thing out for the shipper because they don't understand. They might think, oh, it's just one little pole. Who cares? Yeah. But they'll look at it like it's a giant cube. That's how in the head of a density class calculator, it's a giant cube.
Yeah. All right, let's move into our company highlight. We did have some new team members joining, so we're excited to have them.
Welcome,
part of the
everybody.
ARC team. Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to have them here and to be growing the ARC team to help serve our customers better and ultimately provide a great experience for our customers as far as shipping and logistics goes. So,
welcome, everybody.
And that leads us to our Did You Know section for this month, Andrew.
There you go. Let's hear it.
So I actually pulled some Olympic trivia since Olympics are kicking off. A couple interesting facts here. Figure skating and ice hockey were actually original events in the Summer Games, which is a little strange. But, I mean, they're indoor. But
you need indoor and ice.
Yeah. So thought this was interesting. From 1912 to 1948, you had artists competing for Olympic medals. So we're talking painting, sculpting, architecture, literature, and music. Yeah.
The Olympics for music.
Yeah, the Olympics for architecture. I mean,
that's interesting.
Not sure what that exactly would look like, but you have to design and build something, and you have 2 hours. Kind of feels like on a reality TV show. You have 2 hours. You mentioned a gold bar earlier, and it was a good segue to this because gold medalists were gold medals were last made with pure gold in 1912. So in 1912 you actually got a medal that was gold.
It was actually all gold.
Yeah. So each country could determine how big the medal was too and how much it weighed.
Oh, really?
So whoever the hosting country is gets to determine the medal stuff.
Interesting.
So, but today you only have 6 grams of gold in the medal. So that's the only requirement now. They have to have at least 6 grams of gold, and the rest they can put in whatever.
Nickel or lead or whatever.
So if you get a giant one out, you're still probably just got 6 grams of gold in there.
I got you.
And I thought this last one was really cool. While studying art in Paris in 1900, a 22-year-old American, Margaret Abbott, saw an advertisement for a golf tournament. So she said, I can play golf. I'm going to enter. So she shot a 47 on 9 holes, and she won the tournament and took home a porcelain bowl. Unbeknownst to her, the tournament she entered was part of the Paris Games in 1900, which were the Olympic Games, and she had just become the first American woman to win an Olympic event. So...
That's crazy.
Yeah, she won it with a 47 too.
47.
how times have changed.
I
these
can win
golfers
an
now.
Olympic medal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we can just get back to the 1900.
I just
golf.
need 1900 golf technology,
Yeah, exactly.
and I can win.
Yeah, exactly. So there you have it, some Olympic trivia for you. And that wraps up our July monthly update. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate you guys watching. If you guys need any help with shipping and logistics, of course, reach out to us. We'd be glad to help you or answer any questions. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.